Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Russ, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Craig Emmerich graduated in electrical engineering and spent almost a decade in product management for healthcare software systems. He has taken his engineering approach and followed his wife Maria into the ketogenic nutrition field. He has since dedicated his time researching and looking at nutrition and biology from a systems perspective. Over the last several years, he has worked with hundreds of clients alongside Maria to help them heal their bodies and lose weight, leveraging their biology to make it easy. He is the best-selling author of several books, including Protein-Sparing Modified Fast Cookbook, the Carnivore Cookbook, and Keto, the complete guide to success on the ketogenic diet, including simplified science and no-cook meal plans. Craig and Maria Emmerich have teamed up to create content that digs deep into the science of ketogenic dieting, explaining how it can cure or control dozens of diseases, and even how it is fueling a new breed of athlete. All this is done in an easy to understand way that makes the complicated science much more approachable. You can find Craig Emmerich online and on all social medias, including Instagram at Craig_Emmerich. Craig Emmerich, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Balanced Body Radio.
Thank you so much for having me on, Casey. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, too.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to meet you. I've told you off air that I have followed you and your work for a very long time. You guys are OGs in this field,
Yeah.
man. Go way back. And you have such an interesting story. So I'm really excited to dig into that with you today. And literally, dude, you wrote the book on keto, named Keto. Like the wealth of information you have in this space is really respectable.
Thank you. Yeah, we've learned a lot. I mean, when you're doing this, helping people for over 20 years now, with these kind of lifestyles, you learn a lot. You learn what works, you learn what doesn't work. And so that kind of experience and, combining that with science and biology and how the body works, you can really piece together. One of the things I prided myself on is being able to explain things that are maybe deep concepts, but do it in a way that's easy to understand. And that's what we
Yeah.
tried to do in our keto book.
Yeah, that's amazing. Call that the Ben Bickman talent. He's so good at that himself. And being able to take something so complicated and explain it to, maybe a 5-year-old in a way that they would understand. So I really appreciate that. I also appreciate how you have been able to kind of adjust as we've been learning different things. It wasn't like you wrote the first book and like, this is it, this is the science and religion, it's all solved. You've been able to kind of modify some different things and make revisions to some of your earlier books. And I think that's really respectable.
Yeah, we're always learning. One of the things I learned as an electrical engineer is you got to keep learning. I mean, in electrical engineering, if you're not studying the newest, latest stuff that's coming out, 6 months you're out of date. Like that's how fast it moves. Electronics and computer chips and all that. And so I kind of still have that mentality of I want to keep learning. I want to keep understanding what's the newest things going on. What's the latest science telling us. But also just what are our clients seeing and what when we see different effects with clients with certain things and over time we evolve away from things that don't work as well or don't we learn more about that maybe aren't as great. Like one example is almond flour. Like almond flour, we used to make quite a bit of desserts and things with that, but as we've learned about more about oxalates and how much that can affect people, especially getting like kidney stones and these kind of things. We've kind of weaned away from using quite so much almond flour. I mean, we may still have it as an occasional treat for the boys or something like a cake, but Maria and I don't ever really eat it anymore. So, those kind of things you got to evolve and as you learn and adjust.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad you take that approach. You mentioned engineering already. And before we get into your health story, I just wanted to comment. You are also a fellow former brewmaster. You used to brew your own beer as well.
Yeah, I did. I brewed my own beer, brewed a little bit of wine, but mostly beer for a number of years. Yeah. Got a very strong German background.
It's an amazing process, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty, I enjoyed it. It was interesting, seeing what came out of it and how the flavors develop and all that. But yeah, I'm totally gluten-free now. So I kicked that about 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I don't do any home brewing anymore, but I've brewed quite a bit in my life. And somebody pointed out early on, it's a cool hobby to have because you get a commodity at the end. Like if I go paddleboarding, I don't get like a loaf of bread, or if I go mountain biking, I don't get gas for my car. If you do this process, you actually get something in the end. It's more of a commodity. And boy, like remember they used to sit you down in school and try to teach you about chemistry and math and like engineering, mechanical engineering, and you just didn't care about any of it. Brewing makes you care so much about that stuff. It's amazing. You have to learn all kinds of different things and really learn how to problem solve.
Yeah, it's a chemistry experiment, that you're doing every time. But yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Pretty cool stuff. All right, so tell us a little bit about your health journey. How does an electrical engineer end up, obsessing about nutrition for their career?
Well, it started, of course, with my wife, Maria. She had a bunch of health issues that she struggled with when I first met her. And she had extra weight that she was trying to get rid of, but she was doing all the things that she was taught. And even in getting her nutrition degree, she was being taught the food pyramid again, in college even. And she's like, I'm doing this. I'm eating, healthy whole grains, and I'm eating low fat, and I'm running marathons, and I still have this extra weight, and I still have all these, PCOS and all these health issues. It's not working, And so she started researching on her own. And at one point she went into the doctor, and the doctor basically just told her, these are the cards you're dealt. Here's like 3 prescriptions to deal with PCOS and deal with this and, depression because of all the things she's had, and the same week she goes into our dog, Tiva at the time, she started losing patches of her hair. And so we went into the vet, and the first thing the vet said was, what are you feeding her? And like for my wife, it was like this light bulb moment. The doctor never asked me what I was eating. And yet, just handed me some prescriptions and sent me on my way. And so that was her light bulb moment where she just dove into nutrition and researched and studied everything she could find. And as she applied things to herself, she started to heal, and she started to lose weight. Even though she stopped running marathons, she started, improving in all these ways. And then people asked her why, and, started following her. Myself, it took me a little longer, again, because I brewed my own beer. And I did, I didn't have any health issues at that time. I didn't have any, a little extra weight, maybe 20 pounds, 30 pounds of extra weight. And so I didn't have that pressing need like she did, to find a solution. It took me about 5-6 years to realize that when I ate the stuff she made for me, I just felt a lot better. And so I didn't want to feel crappy anymore on the weekends when I ate whatever I want, at restaurants or whatever. And so I just switched over full time at that point, which was about, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago now.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So with her research, obviously, like if you're new to this world, you'll be stunned to know that there has been lots of research done into this field that goes back decades and even centuries. You'd be a little bit surprised to know that. But 20 years ago, this stuff wasn't very accessible. How was she finding the right information about this kind of stuff?
It was, primarily just looking at studies, looking at biology, reading about biology in general, and understanding, things like oxidative priority and how your body prioritizes different fuels, and just kind of trying to digest it and break it down, and applying it to herself and seeing what works for her. And some of the earliest books on the subject that she got into were like Bullock and Finney, some of their work, which I don't know if that goes back maybe 15 years or something. Those are some of the first books that came in about low carb and whatnot. And of course, the original Atkins, Atkins, especially the early Atkins, the original books, he got a lot right in those books. We've got some of them right up here, but he got a lot right in those early books. What Atkins evolved into this processed food and packaged crap in the store, that's different. But the early stuff, he was really on with a lot of things, prioritizing protein, cutting the carbs down, and so there's some stuff out there, but it wasn't a lot back then, that's for sure.
Yeah, she must have had to work terribly hard. And that was back in the day where you could just go on your phone and just scroll around to try to find some of this
Oh yeah,
stuff.
no, it was going to the library and that kind of stuff
Wow.
primarily. So, and
Yeah.
books.
Wow, that's amazing. You mentioned Atkins, and I think that's a really interesting point. I'd like to remind people that they don't realize there's been a few different iterations of Atkins. It's kind of come and gone. And the one that most people associate with was kind of like circa 1999, 2000, where it was like, yeah, we were eating a lot of protein, and yes, you could take your carbohydrates down, but we were so fat phobic at that point. I saw a lot of people eating chicken breast, and yeah, they lost weight, but they were not very happy.
Yeah.
His original stuff in the 70s was way before we were like we really had that fear of fat ingrained in us.
Yeah, and that's part of it. But also, we may get into this further, but there's some misconceptions in the keto world as well. And in our keto book, I wrote a whole chapter on this. I don't know, 7 years ago we wrote that book. I wrote a whole chapter on keto myths because at that time there was a lot of this kind of stuff going on, and now I see it happening again. It's almost like a cycle that keeps sort of coming up, like the stick of butter a day people that are out there now that talking about you should eat a stick of butter in addition to your every day when you're trying to lose weight. And so there's definitely a thing we have to temper here in that the goals matter. And when we wrote our carnivore book, I don't know, 4 years ago, whatever, 5 year ago, one of the things I really started it out with and really wanted to start out with is, what's your why? What's your why? Why are you doing carnivore? What is it? What are your goals? Because that can really change how you do it, and what your macros might look like, and a lot of different things. And how much you want to eliminate, how much of the plant world you might want to eliminate because of your why. If your why is something like bipolar or some autoimmune disorder, you might want to get really strict and go right to all the way to like beef and salt, right? And do that for a while to eliminate everything, and then kind of build back up. So the why is super important, and this applies with fat too. Like if your why is I'm 300 pounds overweight, no, you don't want to be eating a ton of fat in the diet. You want to moderate it down and allow your body to burn its own fat. So the context is very important with when it comes to dietary fat too.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and I hope everybody considers their own why for how they're choosing their diet, just the way you did. I mean, you found a carnivore diet for a very specific reason. Can you tell us the story of why you decided to try it?
Yeah. And so, about 16, 17 years ago, I was keto, and we never, as a house, as a family, at Maria and I, we never have cheat meals. We never go off plan. This is our lifestyle. We eat this way all the time, whether we're traveling or whatever. And about, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago, I started getting this pain in my lower back. And I thought it was an old football injury that I had from high school, where I damaged a disc and it would slip and on occasion. But it would only happen a couple times a year. And this was like soreness all the time. And it's kind of moved up my back over a number of years and into my shoulders, into my neck. And it's just this soreness and stiffness all the time. And then mobility started to go down. And I'm like, okay, something's really wrong here. And I went into the doctor, and they did the standard Western blot Lyme test, which I now know is like 70, 80% false negative. So it says you don't have Lyme, but you really do. And it said I didn't. And so I spent another year trying to figure out what my problem was, because it sounded like Lyme to me, with all the symptoms I had and whatnot. I had migrating pain in my joints and whatnot. So then I finally got the proper Lyme disease test about 5 years ago, and it said that I did have Lyme. But because it had gone, I don't know, 6 years or something of symptoms progressively getting worse, now I was in this chronic state where if you have this chronic Lyme disease that's been untreated for so long, you have so many other problems, heavy metals, mold, all these things your body can normally deal with, that your immune system just is so stressed out, it can't handle anymore. And they build up and they cause all these other problems. So it's been last, I don't know, 5 years. I've been eating strict carnivore because it helped. It helped with my pain. And one of the reasons I originally decided to go strict carnivore at that point, right? It was 5, 6 years ago, right around when we started writing the Carnivore Cookbook. There's a Charlize Anderson is a woman. It's like 25 years now she's eaten carnivore because of her Lyme disease. She had bad Lyme disease, and she found that she ate carnivore. She had a lot of her symptoms were gone. And so that's why I did it initially like 6 years ago, and I've eaten carnivore ever since. And it does help if I go off plan a bit and eat some too much plant material, my pain will flare up and issues will increase. So it definitely helps.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're not sick of it to the point that you would want to introduce more of those plant foods back in? Are you okay with that kind of compromise?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've found, you know, over this many years, I have found certain things I can have a certain amount of without, too much issue. Like dairy isn't a problem for me. So that I'm fine with that. And, so I have bunless cheeseburgers, with the cheese on them and stuff, and eggs with cheese, and those kind of things. I don't, there's certain spices that if I have too much of, especially things like with casein, like pepper, hot sauce, those kind of things, that will increase my pain. So I got to be careful with that. So it's kind of a, and this is the way we wrote our carnivore book, is you just got to find what works for you and find your tolerance level for different things. And that's why in our book, we define this carnivore autoimmune protocol, CAIP, where you basically start at beef and salt and you slowly add things back in different levels until you find what your body can tolerate and which things cause problems, which ones don't.
Yeah, that's such a smart way to approach. And I wish more people would understand that about carnivore. They think that to be carnivore, you have to be 100% strict all the time, forever, for the rest of your life. And so people think like, well, I can't do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. So why would I even start? And it's like, no. Not many carnivores that I know have to be very strict. I do know people with bipolar that, yes, they have to eat that way. And I know one in particular. We just interviewed her a few weeks ago. Robin Dobbins is her name, and she is a lean mass hyper responder. And she has to decide really uncomfortably between, do I want to have bipolar symptoms, or do I want to think that high LDL cholesterol is not going to kill me because it goes sky high when she eats that way? And she's really mindful about it. And for her, it's like, I have to be willing to take the risk because I can't have bipolar symptoms. That's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And, others like Amber O'Hearn, who, same thing, she's got to stay real strict with it. I can get away with like maybe some grilled onions, maybe a little slice of tomato on the burger occasionally without increasing my symptoms, my pain. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on the person. If you've got something serious like that and it affects you, then I would keep it out. Just go by how your body is reacting.
Yeah. Well, and I do have to point out, you live in an amazing place in the world to not have a dairy sensitivity. That would be crushing to live in Wisconsin and not be able to eat the cheese. That's
Yeah.
one of the best foods I've ever had. So good.
Trust me, I was very happy. I actually went to full beef and salt again about 6 months ago, just because my pain was starting to increase again, and I was like, okay, let's diagnose again. Let's see where there may be some new issues that have crept up, and I was really happy that it wasn't dairy, because once I introduced that back in, I mean, it's just you do eliminate a lot, and being able to add things like sauces. My wife Maria makes amazing sauces for or grilled onions, or some cheese on a burger. I mean, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's great. When I know that you split your time between, where you are now in Wisconsin and also a warmer place in the winter time. So you could always go a little stricter when you're in the warmer place and then have all your cheese when you're back in Wisconsin. Well,
actually, on that point, sorry, back to the, dietary fat. I've eaten zero carb essentially for, 6 years now, but I can I can gain and lose 10 pounds over the holidays because I'll overdo some of the cheese and some of the, indulgences over the holidays. And then what's great is we get to Hawaii after that, and tons of fish, like the best fresh fish, so I'm eating a ton of fish. Well, guess what? Fish is pretty lean. And so I'll shed off those 10 pounds in no time. So just even myself in basically maintenance, I can fluctuate 10 pounds easily just by how much fat I include with my meats.
Yeah, totally. Now that I've been going to a lot more of these low carbohydrate conferences, I've been meeting a lot more people who've been carnivore for a really long time. Sean Baker, Bronson Dant, Dr. Chafee. You meet these guys, and they're all, very pretty strict carnivore. And, they're not always all like photo ready. They're not like about to stand on stage for a competition. You can gain a little bit of weight when you're avoiding carbohydrates. I eat essentially zero, and I notice this every winter, especially, it's like 5 to 10 pounds that I gain. So to say that just eliminating carbohydrates is all you have to do to lose weight is untrue. And I know that's something you talk about a lot, which we can get into later on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important for people that are coming to the space, brand new, and they're like, I'm going to try carnivore. And especially if I'm going to try carnivore to lose weight. And a lot of the carnivore advocates will tell them, or they are out there as a role model saying, eat unlimited fat, eat as much as you want. And we've had tons of people come to us saying, I just I keep gaining weight. I'm following this advice. And the problem is, if you're 300 pounds overweight or 100 pounds overweight, you've got leptin resistance, which means you don't get that I'm full signal as well as somebody like you or I would, in maintenance, and don't have the extra stuffed fat cells, which are causing that leptin resistance. And so leptin is the hormone that tells you I'm full, I should stop eating. Well, you don't get that signal as well when you're obese like that. And so you do overeat, even eating just meat. And so that's an important point that, people have to understand is, you or I, if we put here's what I eat in a day out there, people that want to lose weight shouldn't eat that because we're in maintenance. You or I, we don't have a ton of extra body fat, so we're going to eat more fat. You got to get the fat from somewhere, either off the body or in the diet. So, don't eat what I'm eating because I'm in maintenance. Eat something that's more appropriate for weight loss.
Yeah, very smart. Okay, that is a perfect segue. What I really wanted to do is kind of talk through maybe the life cycle of people who find this way of eating. Let's call it low carb, keto, carnivore, anything in this sphere, however strict we want to define that. When we were back at the corporate gym that we were working at for before the pandemic, we would do weight loss contests. And when we found keto low carb, when we found that it worked for people and we were getting tons of success with it, we started to give our people in our weight loss group like low carb menus, and not the same program that everybody else was getting, which was the grains and fruits and vegetables and lots of meal prepping and all that stuff. And so we were getting good success with that, but we found that we also had to teach people how to do this right. And so we would have a seminar in the very beginning where we'd say, okay, this is what a ketogenic diet is. Here's what to expect. As you're getting started, here's what I want you to know. Don't worry about the other stuff. Just start with this. A month in, we would have to do another one that was like, okay, maybe you're a little stalled. Let's talk about reasons why you're not getting to your goals. There's definitely things that we can dial in. And then the last one, as people were leaving, is like, okay, we did this for a while. Now, what are you going to do moving forward? What is going to be your plan for the rest of your life? And so maybe we could follow like a similar trajectory, since you've got so much experience in all your books and working with so many people, about what things people need to be, watching out for, and what pitfalls to maybe avoid. And you've already brought up people that are coming to this first time. So what would you want somebody to know who has maybe seen keto at the grocery store on a magazine cover and thinks they may want to try this?
Yeah, in our keto book, we talked about kind of the phases of adapting, and we kind of grouped it into 3 phases. When you start cutting the carbohydrates, the body, in the standard American diet, you're primarily burning glucose as your fuel, because you got so much glucose coming in. And there's something called oxidative priority, where the body prioritizes fuels. And it says, if I have this fuel, glucose, I'm not going to burn fat, because I'm going to store the fat, because I need to burn the glucose first. And the reason for oxidative priority is primarily it's inversely proportional to how much storage space you have for each fuel. Okay. So what's the number one fuel? Alcohol, because there's no place to store it. We have no storage space for alcohol. And guess what? Too much alcohol in the blood is going to kill you, right? And so you got to burn the alcohol first. And so if any other fuels are coming in, whether you're eating snacks or food or carbs, that's all got to get stored away while I deal with the alcohol. And so that is oxidative priority. And so when you're eating lots of carbohydrates, the fat is that coming with the food is getting stored away, and it's kind of building up in your fat cells, and you're burning that glucose all the time. And so primarily burning the glucose. So once you start cutting out of the diet, the liver only has, a couple hundred calories of carbohydrate it can store. The glycogen, that's the glucose that's stored in your muscles, that's locked away in the muscles. You can only use that in the muscle, and primarily only through intense exercise. That's another thing that, a misconception. People think, I'll go on a two hour or an hour, 30-minute brisk walk and think I'm, tapping all the glycogen in my muscles. No, you're probably not even touching it. The glycogen in the muscle is basically when you're sprinting, when you're doing intensity or duration like marathon, then you're tapping into that muscle. A brisk walk or a 30-minute, you're probably barely even touching that. And so that's all locked away. It's just what's in the liver. So once the liver burns through what it's got, now it's got to say, okay, I need another fuel, because you're not eating carbs now. So I'm going to start switching to burn fat, but the body isn't can't like switch instantly. There's kind of adaptation period. And part of the adaptation period, studies have actually shown your cells will make more mitochondria to more efficiently burn fat directly as its fuel. Okay. And so the first phase is kind of that first 3 days or so where the body's running out of glucose and your ketones will come higher because the body's looking for fuel. Okay. It's trying to transition. You might be struggling with energy at that point, and you're probably going to go over your fat, what we would tell clients as their fat, limit at that point. You're going to be more hungry. You're going to need to eat more because the body's looking for fuel. Then there's kind of the next phase, which happens anywhere from a couple weeks to maybe a month or 6 weeks, is where you get that fully adapted state. So now you've made the new mitochondria, your body's really good at burning fat as its primary fuel now, and what we would call keto adapted, where you can efficiently burn fat as your fuel. That's when the hunger goes down, the cravings go down, you get into this state where you just have that even energy all day long, the mental clarity, all of the kind of things that you think of with a keto or carnivore type of diets, from the mental or just how you feel. And then there's kind of another phase of, if you've been doing this long enough, year, 2 years, you can still see some improvements in athletic performance and things. There's even Volek and Fiddy did a study on this. I think it was 1 year out, or maybe it was 2. They looked at athletes and they were improving their efficiency when they were keto for that long. So versus a study where they were maybe just 2 months keto. So there's efficiencies that are continuing to happen, as you stay in this lifestyle longer. But that's kind of generally the kind of phases we look at.
I love that. If we go back to phase 1, do you generally recommend that people kind of go cold turkey and deal with that kind of energy crash like you talk about? Or do you recommend that people do it more gradually, or can people do either one?
You can do it either way, but I'll tell you, it's to gradually wean off carbs is going to be hard because, you can't just eat one, potato chip, or you can't, it's just going to be, especially for people that are obese or have, binge eating and these type of disorders, you're not going to be able to stop yourself when you get to those carbs and you're trying to wean. We generally find it's better to just go cold turkey, just get it all out of the house, because that's the other thing in that early stage when your body's like looking for fuel. Those, cupcakes or whatever it is in the pantry are going to be calling your name all day if you're in that state, right? Like you're just going to not be able to avoid them. If they're not in the house, and especially what we tell people is make this is where you can make one of Maria's desserts and one of these keto treats, desserts, whatever your cravings are, craving for, to satisfy that craving, but stay on track. That's a great time to have those.
Yeah, I think it's also good to examine yourself and know whether you are more of a moderator or more of an abstainer. For me, I learned about myself. I have to abstain. It sucks. I would love to have a bite of something here or there, and I can't do it because it leads to more things. I will not stop, and then I'll get crazy anxious or something stupid. So it's just like I have to stay away. Where maybe some people could dabble in it, but I tend to agree with you. I think it's easier if somebody just accepts, like, let me just step away from sweet things for a little while. Like maybe I can reintroduce them later, or maybe I'm just going to feel so good anyway on the other stuff that I won't even really miss it. So I love that. And then what things do you recommend to help people feel, not so crappy as they're making that transition?
Yeah. One quick point on the occasional thing. We have had so many clients that will come back to us a year later and they've gained all the weight back. And it turns out over the holidays, they were going to have that one cupcake and that's it. They were just going to have one. And 6 months later, they've gained all the weight back. That's so common where people, if they think they're just going to have one and they end up off the wagon for 6 months, and it's a bad cycle. It's really almost like an addiction. I mean, and it's kind of crazy too, in a social standpoint, if you or I were an alcoholic and decided to stop alcohol and we were at a party together, I'm not going to push a beer on you, and I'm not going to push a beverage on you. But if I abstain from sugar, and you go to a party, somebody's going to have that cupcake and like, come on, you can just have one. It's not going to kill you. But you really got to, especially if you're, obese or morbidly obese, you got to treat it a lot of times like that. It's got to be treated like an addiction. But yeah, in the beginning phases, the biggest thing that you can do is get your electrolytes up. Carbohydrates retain water. And the more carbohydrates you eat, the more water you retain. But the less you eat when you cut them out, the retained water gets flushed out of your system. And that's why people, a lot of times in the beginning of keto, they'll lose, they go keto or carnivore and they'll lose 5-10 pounds in the first week. It's the water weight that they're losing. But when the water goes, so the electrolytes go too. Whenever water comes out of you, it's salty. It's losing electrolytes. And so in the early stages, a lot of times that kind of struggle with energy is dehydration. And if they just keep their electrolytes up, taking electrolyte drinks, staying hydrated, it'll mitigate a lot of that low energy.
Yeah, that's good advice. I found that to be the case as well. And I was talking to one of my clients about it today. She has experimented in the last year or so with changing her diet to improve her performance for endurance sport. And she follows somebody who recommends a very heavy plant-based diet and all the things that she's recommending to eat. And the problem maybe isn't even what she's recommending to eat. The problem is if I ate those things, I would be so hungry for all the other stuff that I would eat, the granola bars and the more goos and gels and like all this other stuff. Like maybe it's good advice if you could stick with that, but I don't think anybody can stick with it because you're going to be so hungry all the time. So it's kind of different. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Especially if you go a lot of plant-based, like you're saying, you got to turn into a grazing animal because you got to eat all the time. You just can't get the nutrients and the energy that you need to sustain you a lot of times. And so, contrast to that carnivore where most people are fine with 2 meals and that's it, no snacks, that's all they need.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the recent study that showed the more plant-based you were, the more processed foods there would be in your diet, which makes a lot of sense. If you're eating a lot of carnivore foods, you don't have a lot of processed foods. You're full and happy on those things. If we go to the second phase of transition, some people are given different advice about tracking. So I want to ask you about tracking, whether that's something you recommend. If so, is there a method that you like? But some people can get frustrated. And you kind of were demonstrating that when somebody starts with this diet, they are going to have a high amount of ketones in the blood. And so if they're using something like Keto Mojo, checking their blood, or they're checking the urine, it shows that they will be in a very deep state of ketosis pretty quick. But over time, it doesn't do that because the body adjusts the production of ketones to where it needs to be, and then also adjusts its uptake of ketones and learns how to use that as a fuel. And those kind of like correct out. So people ended up getting really frustrating. So my question is, advice about tracking, is there something you recommend? If so, what particular kind? And what do you say to people who come back and complain to you that like, why is this showing that I'm not in ketosis?
Yeah. So generally speaking, for clients, we don't bother tracking any blood or glucose or ketones, really. If you're going to take the time and the effort, the money, focus on your food and getting macros, something that would track your macros to something that would make sense for you. And there's a couple of reasons for that we promote tracking, at least for a while. I don't track now. I mean, I know what I can eat and I know, but coming from a standard American diet, you may not know what 100 grams of protein looks like on a plate, or for a day. And what's important about that is your protein goal is based on your lean mass. And if you're not tracking, you could be in a place where you're not getting enough protein, and over time you're going to lose lean mass, and that's not something anybody wants. Nobody wants to lose muscle, especially as we age. We need more protein just to maintain our muscle, and so having a protein goal that's based on your lean mass is really kind of a minimum threshold that's so important for everybody, no matter what state they're in, whether it's weight loss, whether it's health and healing, whether it's maintenance. You need a certain amount of protein for all that turnover amino acids in your body, not just building and repairing muscle, but your skin, your hair, your nails, all this protein that's required for your body. So for us, we think it's important to track macros just for making sure you get enough protein, and for some people coming from standard American diet, to make sure you're not getting too much carbohydrate. We'll get people that they're like, yeah, I'm sure I'm at 20 grams of carbs. And then they actually track and they're like 60 or 70 because it's, carbohydrates are hidden in everything. And so in the standard American diet, especially. But then also, especially in that second phase where it's like after a month and your hunger's now under control, looking at the fat and maybe moderating the fat down a bit because you're not as hungry. And now you can kind of use that as your dial now. You got your protein set, you got your carbs good, you're under the limit. Now you just adjust that fat dial based on the goals. If you're not losing weight, dial it down a little bit. That'll kick the weight loss up. If you're getting close to your maintenance, dial it back up and just adjust it that way.
Yeah, wonderful advice. What other things do you notice cause stalls for people, especially if they're coming to low carbohydrate diets because weight loss is their primary goal?
Dairy and nuts are a big one.
Agreed.
The second thing I would ask anybody after, do you know what your macros are? Is, if they're not losing weight, are you eating any dairy and nuts? That's one of the biggest causes of stalls because there's been studies on this that there's certain foods that you give them a certain amount and they'll cause a certain amount of satiety, right? And there's certain foods that just don't trigger satiety the same. And two of the worst ones are dairy and nuts. And if you think about it, I've seen this picture before. There's like two hands with a pile of nuts in each hand, and they don't look like that much different. It looks like there's a couple extra nuts in the one palm, but it's twice the calories because, it's just, did you grab that many or did you grab twice? Like nuts are one of those things you just grab a handful and you could add twice as many as you did last time, or you just don't know. And it's just too easy to overeat. Same thing with dairy. Dairy becomes too easy to overdo. And so cutting those two things can really help a lot of people.
I love that. It was Dr. Bill Schindler that pointed out, like when he was growing up, he would get nuts for sure, but it would be Christmas time, and it was a lot of work. You had to shell them yourself and crack them open, and like it kind of self-selected to the point that you couldn't overeat them because it was so much damn work just to get to them anyway. That is a
Exactly.
huge difference than going to Costco and buying that giant bag of shelled almonds that are ready to go. You're right. Like people can't just stop at one handful. They keep going, and that's like mindless kind of snacking. You never really hit satiety the way you would eating other foods like animal products.
Exactly. Or, another thing that is a pet peeve of mine is bulletproof coffee. People will be like, oh, I drink a bulletproof coffee and I'm not hungry till 4:00. Well, yeah, because it was 500 calories. Like you got half a stick of butter in there. And, if I sat down to like 10 eggs, which is about the same amount of calories, I probably want to eat again all day, from eating 10 eggs or at least, longer. Plus you're getting all the vitamins and minerals that are in the eggs, right? The bulletproof coffee has almost no vitamins and minerals. Fat is our fuel. And in maintenance, we need lots of fat to fuel our bodies, but the vitamins and minerals are in the protein, not the fat.
Mm. Yeah, very well said. Another thing that I notice with stalling, and tell me if you notice this as well, is somebody will be low carb for sure, and I'll see their macros, and they'll show me the carbohydrates that they have in a day, and the number will be low, but the frequency sneaks up and starts to get a little higher, and it's like there's little snacky carbohydrates, or maybe little pieces of candy, or there's other things, and I really wonder, like, is it more important to have a low amount of carbohydrates, but have it through the day spread out all the time? Or is it better, have 100 grams, but have it once. So you only have that one surge of insulin rather than kind of, poking the bear all day. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously we would prefer they didn't have any of it, none of the sugar. But, I think, as far as there's been some studies that, are for or not really showing any benefit of intermittent fasting per se when it comes to equal calories. And so I do think that intermittent fasting is good and it comes naturally to people eating carnivore because you're just not as hungry as often. So you just eat 2 meals, or sometimes 1 meal, which can be okay as long as you're getting enough protein. And the only caveat we have with OMAD is that some women can't get enough protein in 1 meal. And so they end up under eating protein. And over time, they can lose muscle, and that's not good. And that lowers your metabolic rate, BMR. But generally speaking, yeah, it's good. But if I had the exact same macros and I did it in 3 meals or 1 meal, I don't think from a weight loss standpoint it's going to matter. I
Okay.
think at the end of the day, the carbohydrates will end up in the same place in storage. The fat will end up in the same place in storage. You may trigger again if you're able to control exactly the macros, right? The one thing that will happen typically is you'll eat more if you eat 3 times, because that third meal, oh, you grab another bite, or because you're eating now again, and a lot of times what will happen is if you do 3 meals instead of 2, you'll end up eating more without really realizing it because you had that third meal.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, that's a great segue to our final transition. You talked about the third phase of the transition, and this is kind of the constant refining. Let's start with something we've already talked about. Maybe we can just hammer this home a little bit. The protein to fat ratio. I get asked about this constantly. How does somebody know they're getting too much fat relative to protein and vice versa?
Yeah, so there's something, the PDE ratio is another way to do that. It's protein to energy, which is basically protein divided by fat plus carbs, which if you're carnivore, there's not really any carbs per se. There's a couple here and there, but so the protein to fat ratio, if you look at that number specifically, if you just take the grams of protein divided by the grams of fat, if you're in the below 1 range, you're starting lower, like 0.5 or lower. That's kind of more of a maintenance type of recipe to us. If you start going up to 1, that's pretty good for weight loss. If you get above 1 to as high as 2, that's really good. And you start getting to ratios of 3. Those are what we start getting into, like the protein sparing modified fast days, which are something that we have clients do in place of something like a water fast. So people that want to do like a 2-day or 3-day water fast, instead of doing that, we promote doing 1 or 2 or 3 days of protein sparing modified fast, which is basically just hit your protein goal and then almost no fat or carbs. And so you mimic a fast in that your body's forced to burn a lot of its own fuel because you're not getting any fuel, but you get enough protein to maintain your muscle versus losing some lean mass when you water fast. So it's an alternative to that.
Yeah, gotcha. So, how often do you recommend protein sparing modified fasting? Is that something that somebody can do, every week, every month? Like, how often should somebody be thinking about doing that?
Yeah, context is really important with that too. If somebody is, we had a client who's 645 pounds. He has so much fat available and readily available to his body to supply it with fuel that he could almost do it every day. But even in his case, we made sure to add what we call overfeeding days every week, so that you don't want your body sitting at a low calorie level for every day for extended periods. There's something called metabolic adaptation. It's like the Biggest Loser study where they showed that these people did have a down regulation of the metabolism because they ate very low calorie for a long time. And so that's why overfeeding days can help, shake that up. For a typical person, we tell them 1 to 3 days in a week is kind of the limit. And if you're doing on the more like 3 days a week, you want to do an overfeeding day every week too. So overfeeding day is basically you're not eating carbs and a bunch of pizza or whatever. You're eating just more fat and basically at a maintenance level of macros. So you're just basically adding more fat to like a maintenance level. Just again, keep the body honest, keep the metabolism from down regulating. In general, I mean, protein sparing is a tool. It's, again, thinking of it in context of like a water fast. You're not going to water fast 3 days a week every week, right? Like you're going to maybe once a month, you're going to do this, or in specific cases where you're stalled for a long time and you want to try to break that stall, protein sparing modified fast for a couple of days might be a good way to break the stall. It's a tool. It's not something you're going to do all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. You brought up Biggest Loser study. I haven't thought about this in a while. I actually measured somebody and their metabolic rate using a metabolic cart after they had done the contest. This was probably a decade ago. And yeah, you're right. She crushed her metabolism. I mean, she was burning about 1,000 calories less than what she should have been, and what her numbers looked like before she did the contest. I don't know if she ever recovered from that. It's a long road to recovery, and we were used to seeing it in those cases, like you mentioned, people that are over fasting, under eating, chronically over exercising. You have a suppression in your metabolic rate. How would you like to know that you're teaching yourself how to burn less calories all the time? It's the worst. It's
Yeah.
the last thing you absolutely want to do. For you, what are some signs and symptoms that people are pushing too far down that road?
Well, in our groups and things, we'll see people that are like, oh, I'm doing it 4 days a week, every week, or this kind of thing. And we try our best, and we put out a number of videos recently on this. And the thing with people is, everybody's kind of, if one is good, two is better, right? Like everybody has this mentality of, I'm just gonna go all in, and like you said, it's not always good. There's downsides to doing that. And so we push back really hard as much as we can. That there's even people, I've seen comments online of videos, and somebody would say something about me or Maria, and they're like, yeah, they do protein sparing or something, that's why. And it's like, I've done protein sparing day ever. Maria hasn't done them in like 10 years because she's lost all the weight she needs to lose. This is not just because we put a book out on it doesn't mean I do it all the time. So I mean, it's kind of weird how people's minds work with that. But it's a tool. It can be used occasionally, but generally speaking, I would try to use normal keto or carnivore weight loss type macros. Do it slowly and healthy weight loss, and get your goal. People want to spend 5 years putting on weight, and then they want to spend 5 weeks getting it all off. It's going to
Totally.
take time, and you got to just trust the process.
Yeah, totally. And I think somebody could even be paying attention to something simple like how do you feel as far as warmth in your extremities, especially in your hands and feet, because your metabolic rate's coming
Yeah.
down. You might notice you're starting to feel pretty cold. If you need a jacket in July, you may need to look at that and see if you're over fasting or under consuming calories. I think that's a cool way to think about the ratios of protein to fat, and have it be something that kind of dances a little bit. It's not something that's always fixed. Do you
Yeah.
notice any difference in digestion if somebody's not getting enough fat? Is that something that comes up quite a bit?
Um, Not getting enough fat, I don't really see any issues typically with people. It's typically on the other end of, they're getting a lot of fat, and maybe their GI is flushing out, causing some issues there. Usually, myself, the more solid I am with my protein and nothing else, the more consistent daily my GI is, and it's when I start adding other things, and then it's, whether it's getting a little too much onion or adding some tomato and different things, that's when the GI will get a little iffy. But, for me, I'm the most regular when I'm just consistent with meat.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so you've already told us that you have no interest in leaving this way of eating anytime soon. You and your family, not only Maria, but your gorgeous kids. You're so cute. I love seeing pictures of them running around all over the place. You guys are all kind of eating in this way, and it's one thing to do something for yourself. It's a totally different thing to be doing something for your kids. So, how comfortable and confident are you that this way of eating can be done long term for the rest of their lives?
100%. I mean, you know, I look at it from a couple data points, and number one, look at our ancestors. I mean, there's tons of studies now, these anthropological studies where they look at the collagen in the bone of the early humans and Neanderthals, and from that bone collagen, the nitrogen content, you can tell how much protein they ate and what kinds of protein. Was it plant proteins? Was it what types of animals they ate? All of that. And time after time after time, there's tons of these studies now that have been done that show over and over that the early humans were apex carnivores. They were more apex carnivores than lions and hyenas of that time period, because they tested the lion and hyenas bones too. And they saw that we were eating even more than them of meat. And so, I look at that, and then, I also look at it as my boys eat meat and low carb vegetables. What world did we get into where that was an extreme diet, meat and low carb veggies? meat and veggies, right? Like, I don't know. I just, I made this meme a while back of my son Kai eating this bowl of like, it was like an Asian dish with meat and vegetables in it. It was really bright and pretty looking that Maria took. And then next to it, I put a picture of one of these, standard American diet kids with processed sugar rainbow of, food dyes and God knows what, and all this candy and crap that's surrounding them, fruit roll-ups and all this crap. And it's like, this is extreme with my son, but this over here is normal. Like, I mean, go back 200 years and that rainbow of crap that the kids, let your kids be kids are eating today is frankenfood. Nobody would recognize it as food. And yet that's normal now. So, I'm very confident in, what we feed our kids is going to lead them to the best health.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure you're like me, kind of jealous of the way they're being brought up. After I was brought up on skim milk and peanut butter sandwiches and granola bars, to like see them
Oh,
look
my-
like they're writing.
my dad was working 3 jobs, and my mom had 6 kids, that she was taking care of that were like 7.5 years apart.
Oh
And
wow.
we ate a lot of rice. I mean, one of the big breakfasts was rice with milk and sugar on it,
Wow.
and so, yeah, I mean, I feel blessed to be able to feed them this way. That's for sure.
Yeah, I love asking parents this question. What do you notice in the difference between they are and the way they live, the way they behave, the way maybe they perform versus other kids? Is the gap super wide?
I would say from energy standpoint, it is. I mean, they both love football. They have flag football that their teams that they're on every fall. And yeah, they can just run up and down the field like crazy. And the other kids are all gassed on the sideline. And so I definitely noticed that. But I think fueling them for properly as well as electrolytes is important too, especially in sports. Making sure they get their electrolytes into that is definitely going to help with performance.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so I don't know of anybody better than you to answer this question. You have been in this world for so long. You've got a good pulse on what's going on in the community. I just got back not too long ago from KetoCon. Amazing time, was an amazing conference. It was interesting to observe what was going on with the keto branding things and the carnivore things. And I noticed at a very consumer heavy type of a conference, the consumer tended to gravitate more towards carnivore things from what I could tell. And I would say that a lot of the keto branded stuff was not getting as much attention. So we're in this weird kind of place. Like next year, it's not going to be called KetoCon. It's going to be called something different, Hack Your Health or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of moving away from the name keto, which is fine. But it's also like a popular thing. You see more products than ever, slim fast keto stuff. It's kind of everywhere, but it also seems like the keto, the word itself, is maybe like kind of dying off a little bit, and it's in one way kind of interesting and maybe a good thing because we're maybe moving past it, but it's also like we don't want people to forget the benefits of ketosis. Like you want to be in some form of ketosis for pretty much the rest of your life. Where do you see the industry going? What makes you optimistic? What makes you pessimistic? Where do you think it's going to go?
Well, I think some of that maybe has to do with the fact that a lot of the keto products are just processed junk. you know, we have been advocates from the beginning that you eat a whole foods approach. Like whole foods is going to be the healthiest way. Anything processed is not going to be that great for you. And so from that standpoint, if you look at a lot of keto products that are out there, especially like the Atkins keto and some of these keto packaged products, they're just a bunch of processed food ingredients. They might be keto in their macros per se, but we tell most people if it says keto on the box, avoid it because it's probably got some junk ingredients in it that aren't great. Stick with whole foods, meat and veggies, or just meat if you're a carnivore. And there's definitely exceptions to that rule, carnivore crisps and some of these products I think are great. It's just beef and salt, and it's gives you a little texture like a crispy chip, and so that can be great for variety and whatnot. But generally, I wonder if that's part of the reason is because people are understanding that just because it says keto on the box doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be too healthy for you.
Yeah, good point. It's such a scam too. I remember the first time I saw that, and it was at the store. It was a package, in a box. The total weight of the thing was net less than 3 ounces. It for like $12. The thing could have like floated off into outer space. It was so light. Like what is in that food? Anything that has less than half an ounce per serving is going to be keto. You can eat anything, and that would
Yeah,
fit
exactly.
keto macro. Like, give me a break.
Yeah,
So sad.
exactly.
Well, we're fortunate enough to be able to talk to Maria in a few months, so definitely looking forward to that. What is it like to be working alongside her as she's providing wonderful alternatives for people to be thinking about ways they can expand what they eat? She's creating lots of different recipes and sharing them and helping families all over the place make this more accessible. That must be one of the more fun parts of what you do.
Absolutely. She's amazing. She is like a chemist, again, back to the chemistry, in the kitchen, because she's been doing this for so long that she can just, she wants to do a recipe of something. She just kind of knows the ratios. She kind of knows the ingredients, what'll work, what won't. Like, it's just so ingrained in her that she can, first or second try, she's got a recipe perfected just because she kind of knows what goes together with what, and what alternate ingredients can be used for things, to like her bread, like the protein sparing bread, which is got hugely popular online. It's just egg whites and egg white protein powder. She knows that the egg white protein powder is going to give you kind of a texture, like a gluten kind of texture to bread, and then adds that and makes her experiments. But most of the time it's only 1 or 2 tries and she's got a recipe that's awesome. Like, it's that natural for her to know what ingredients work with what and what ratios. So it's pretty impressive. But together we make an amazing team because she has all that down rock solid, and I kind of help with the science and the just keeping our website running, and then my engineering background. So I'm working on our website, keeping things working there, and doing all the back end stuff. So we make a great team that way. It really, really is great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love following you guys on social media and see what you guys are up to, and always great food and a lot of smiles, a lot of happy people, which I absolutely love. And like I said, I think it's really important to make this accessible for people because it is very difficult out there what people are facing. A lot of wrong advice and a lot of ways to go wrong. So I think this was a really wonderful conversation where we gave the listener quite the guide of how to kind of get through and get on with a low carbohydrate diet. So I really appreciate your time. I know you're very busy. Tell the listeners where they can go to find you and connect with you and your work.
Thank you, Casey. It's ketomaria.com is a great place because I made this website with all the links to everything else. So you just got to go to one place, ketomaria.com, and you can get to our blog, you can get to our ebooks, you can, on the bottom, there's links to all of our social media. So that's the place to
Awesome.
go.
Easy. I love it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, Craig, like I said at the beginning of this content, or this interview, you are an OG. I really appreciate all of your work and making this accessible for people like me who had to learn this much later and was struggling to try to figure some of this stuff out and figure out the science. And you've been able to do that. Maria's been able to do that, and for you guys to share your message is just wonderful. You are definitely a power couple. So thank you again so very much for your time today, and thank you so much for appearing on our show. We really are grateful for you.
Thank you so much, Casey.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Balanced Body Radio.